My name is Tom Langley, and I used to believe in marriage the way some people believe in horoscopes, against all evidence to the contrary. At 42, I'd spent 15 years perfecting the art of being a good husband, while my wife Sadie perfected the art of being somewhere else. Thursday evening, October 12th, 2024. I was driving home from my job as an IT project manager at Morrison Tech, watching the sky turn the color of old bruises. The weather forecast had promised light showers. What we got instead was God's personal vendetta against anyone stupid enough to trust meteorologists. By 7 p.m., the rain was coming down like it had a personal grudge against my windshield. Visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet, and my 15-year-old Honda was hydroplaning more than driving. The smart thing would have been to pull over immediately. The smart thing would have been a lot of things I didn't do that night. I'd been thinking about Sadie during the drive, which had become my unfortunate habit lately. She'd been distant for months, not the comfortable distance of a long marriage, but the careful distance of someone keeping secrets. More overtime at her HR job, more girls' nights out, more phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. My brother Pete had been planting seeds of suspicion for weeks. "Tommy," he'd said last Sunday while we watched the Bears lose another game they should have won, "Saddie's acting weird, like weirder than usual, and that's saying something." Pete worked construction and had the subtle observation skills of a brick through a window, but he wasn't wrong. Sadie had been acting strange. New clothes appearing in her closet, perfume I didn't recognize, and a sudden interest in staying late at the office that coincided perfectly with her newfound enthusiasm for her phone. The rain got worse. My windshield wipers were fighting a losing battle, and I could barely make out the taillights of the car ahead of me. That's when I saw the warm glow of Rosie's Café on Maple Street, a little place Sadie and I used to go to when we were dating. Before marriage became a spectator sport, and I became the guy watching from the bench. I pulled into the parking lot, my car sliding slightly on the wet asphalt. The rain was hammering my roof like an angry landlord demanding rent. I sat there for a moment, watching the water cascade down my windows, thinking about how I'd planned to surprise Sadie with dinner tonight. She'd canceled, of course. "Rain and a late work meeting," she'd said. "You understand, honey?" I understood, all right. I understood that 15 years of marriage had taught me to accept excuses without asking questions. I understood that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being a husband and started being a convenience. The cafe looked warm and inviting through the downpour. I made a run for it, getting soaked in the 20 feet between my car and the door. The bell above the entrance chimed as I pushed inside, shaking rain from my jacket like a wet dog. Rosie's hadn't changed much in the years since Sadie and I had stopped coming. Same checkered tablecloths, same smell of coffee and fresh pastries, same cozy lighting that made everyone look like they were in a romantic movie. There were maybe a dozen people scattered around, most of them staring out the windows at the storm. I ordered a black coffee from the teenage barista who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Crazy weather," I said, trying to make conversation. "Yeah," she replied with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a tax code. "Table or counter?" "Table's fine." I turned to scan the room for a quiet spot, coffee in hand, still dripping rainwater onto the worn wooden floor. That's when I saw them. Corner booth, back of the restaurant. My wife Sadie, sitting on another man's lap. Not next to him, not across from him. On his lap, like a teenager at a house party. Her arms were around his neck, her fingers playing with his hair, and they were both laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear. Intimate. Close. The kind of close that doesn't happen by accident. I stood there, frozen, coffee growing cold in my hand. The rational part of my brain was cataloging details like evidence, the way her hand rested on his chest, how comfortable they looked together. The fact that she was wearing the blue dress I'd complimented her on that morning when she said she was dressing up for a client meeting. The man was David Kennedy, Sadie's co-worker. I'd met him at a few company parties, younger than me, better looking, the kind of guy who probably had a gym membership he actually used. Sadie talked about him sometimes, always in the context of work projects and office politics. Never in the context of sitting on his lap in dark corners of cafes. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the rain. 15 years of marriage, and this was how I found out. Not through a confrontation or a confession, but by pure accident, because Mother Nature decided to dump half the Great Lakes on Chicago. Sadie turned her head, still laughing at whatever David had said. Her eyes swept across the cafe casually, the way you look around when you're comfortable and happy and not expecting your world to end. Then she saw me. The laughter died on her lips. Her face went completely pale, all the color draining out like someone had pulled a plug. She scrambled off David's lap so fast she nearly knocked over their coffee cups, her hands shaking as she tried to smooth down her dress. David, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, looked confused. "What's wrong, honey?" he asked, his voice carrying just enough for me to hear. He hadn't turned around yet, hadn't seen me standing there like a statue made of rage and disbelief. Sadie was stammering, trying to form words that wouldn't come. "Nothing, nothing." I started walking toward their table, slowly, deliberately. Each step felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The other customers were starting to notice something was happening, conversations dying as I passed their tables. "Sadie," I said when I was close enough that she couldn't pretend she hadn't seen me. David started to turn around, still confused about why his afternoon delight had suddenly turned into a panic attack. Before he could complete the turn, before he could see my face and put the pieces together, I pulled out my phone and took a picture. The camera flash lit up their corner booth like lightning, capturing Sadie's terrified expression and David's confused profile perfectly. "What are you doing?" Sadie gasped, jumping like I'd fired a gun. "Documenting," I said calmly, "for posterity." David finally turned around completely and saw me. Recognition dawned slowly across his face. I could practically watch the gears turning as he realized exactly who I was. His mouth fell open. You're her husband," he stammered. "Guilty as charged," I replied, taking another photo. This one got both their faces clearly, David looking like he'd been caught robbing a bank, and Sadie looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "Tom, please," Sadie begged, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Let me explain." "Explain what, exactly? How you ended up on another man's lap by accident? Did you trip and fall? Wrong turn on the way to the bathroom?" David tried to stand up, probably thinking he could slip away while Sadie handled the angry husband. I stepped to the side, blocking his path to the exit. "Not so fast, Romeo. We're not done here." My phone was already dialing. Sadie watched in horror as I put it on speaker. "Who are you calling?" she whispered. "Your boss." The blood drained from her face completely. "Tom, no, please don't." The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Jennifer Walsh." "Hi, Jennifer. This is Tom Langley, Sadie's husband. I'm calling about employee conduct." There was a pause. "I'm sorry. Who is this?" "Sadie Langley's husband. I'm currently at Rosie's Café on Maple Street, where I've just discovered my wife having an affair with her co-worker, David Kennedy. I thought HR should know about this violation of company policy." I could hear Jennifer's sharp intake of breath. "Mr. Langley, I'm going to need verification of this claim." I interrupted her by sending the photos to her company email. "Check your inbox. I just sent you photographic evidence." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then I heard the soft ping of an email notification, followed by Jennifer's shocked gasp. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Thank you for your time, Jennifer. I'm sure you'll handle this appropriately." I hung up and looked at Sadie, who had collapsed back into the booth like her strings had been cut. "Congratulations. You just cost yourself your job." "You bastard," she whispered, but there was no fight left in her voice. David was standing now, his face white as paper. My wife, Linda, works there too. She's going to find out. Oh, she already knows, I said, pulling up Linda's contact information. I'd met her at several company functions, a no-nonsense woman who didn't suffer fools gladly. I typed a quick message and attached the photos. Your husband is having an affair with my wife. Thought you should know. Tom Langley. I hit send and showed David the screen. His phone buzzed immediately. Then it started ringing. Linda, he answered, his voice shaking. Even from where I stood, I could hear her screaming. The call lasted maybe 30 seconds before David hung up, his hand trembling. You've destroyed everything, Sadie said, tears streaming down her face. Have I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you two did that all by yourselves. I just documented it. The entire cafe was watching us now. The teenage barista had her phone out, probably recording the whole thing for TikTok. An elderly couple at the next table was whispering excitedly, like they'd stumbled onto the best soap opera episode of their lives. I looked around at our audience, then back at Sadie and David. They were both sitting there, shaking, unable to meet my eyes or each other's. You know what the funny thing is? I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I came in here to wait out the storm. Turns out the real storm was just getting started. I walked toward the door, leaving them both sitting in their corner booth, surrounded by the wreckage of their afternoon and the stares of a dozen strangers. The rain was still coming down hard, but I didn't care anymore. I had work to do. I drove home through the storm with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The rain that had seemed so threatening an hour ago now felt like a baptism, washing away 15 years of willful blindness and polite pretense. My phone was buzzing constantly, Sadie calling, texting, probably trying to craft some explanation that would make sense of what I'd witnessed. I didn't answer. My house looked different when I pulled into the driveway. Same suburban colonial, same well-maintained lawn, same white picket fence that Sadie had insisted on because it looked wholesome. But now it felt like a stage set for a play I no longer wanted to be in. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, Rita Gonzalez. I'd used her for some contract work a few years back, and she had a reputation for being thorough, smart, and completely without sentiment when it came to divorce proceedings. Tom? Rita's voice was surprised. It was almost 9 p.m. What's going on? I need to file for divorce, tonight if possible. There was a pause. What happened? I told her everything. The cafe, the photos, the phone calls. Rita listened without interrupting, occasionally making small notes or asking for clarification. Do you have the photos? She asked when I finished. Multiple angles, high resolution, time-stamped. Good. And you said you called her boss? Both their bosses, technically, and his wife. Rita chuckled, a sound like ice cubes clinking in a glass. Tom, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I have to say, that's some of the best evidence gathering I've ever seen from a civilian. Most people just scream and throw things. I'm not most people. No, you're not. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'll start the paperwork tonight and file first thing tomorrow morning. With evidence this clear, and given that she violated her company's ethics policy, we should be able to get a very favorable settlement. I don't want her money, Rita. I want her gone. Trust me, Tom. You want the money too. 15 years of marriage means you're entitled to half of everything. Don't let anger make you stupid. After I hung up with Rita, I called a locksmith. 24-hour service, cash payment, no questions asked. While I waited for him to arrive, I went through the house methodically, gathering Sadie's belongings. Clothes, shoes, makeup, books, the little decorative items she'd accumulated over the years. Everything went into boxes and garbage bags. The locksmith arrived at 11 p.m., a tired-looking man in his 50s who'd probably seen this scenario more times than he cared to count. Changing the locks on your own house? He asked, not really a question. Getting divorced, Wife's been cheating? He nodded sympathetically. Sorry to hear that, buddy. Happens more than you'd think. You want me to do all the exterior doors? Everything. Front door, back door, garage, basement. And I want the good stuff. Deadbolts, security chains, the works. While he worked, I carried Sadie's belongings out to the front porch. Box after box, bag after bag, 15 years of shared life reduced to a pile of possessions waiting for pickup. The rain had finally stopped, but the air was still thick with humidity and the promise of more storms to come. Sadie arrived just as the locksmith was finishing the last door. I heard her car in the driveway, then the sound of her heels clicking on the wet pavement. She tried her key in the front door, and when it didn't work, she started pounding. Tom, open this door. We need to talk. I opened the door but left the security chain engaged, so she could only see a slice of my face through the gap. Your things are on the porch, I said calmly. Tom, please. Let me explain. It's not what you think. Really? Because what I think is that I caught you sitting on another man's lap in a cafe, acting like a teenager with a crush. What part of that did I misunderstand? It just happened, okay? David and I, we've been working late together and things just developed. But it doesn't mean anything. It was just what, Sadie? Just intimacy. Just an emotional affair. Just the complete destruction of our marriage. Which part was just supposed to make me feel better? She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in dark streaks. I made a mistake. People make mistakes, Tom. We can work through this. No, we can't. You made a choice. Multiple choices over multiple months. You chose to lie to me, to sneak around behind my back, to make me feel crazy for noticing that something was wrong. Those weren't mistakes, Sadie. That was a campaign. The locksmith cleared his throat behind me. All finished, Mr. Langley. You want me to stick around? I looked at Sadie through the gap in the door. She was staring at the pile of her belongings, finally understanding that this wasn't going to be a conversation about forgiveness and second chances. No, we're good. Thanks for coming out so late. After he left, Sadie tried a different approach. Tom, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But throwing me out of my own house? That's not legal. Actually, it is. I called my lawyer. Since your name isn't on the deed, something about your credit score when we bought the place, remember? And since you've been committing adultery, I have every right to change the locks and ask you to leave. Her face went white. You called a lawyer? Already? I also called your boss, remember? And David's wife. And I took pictures. Lots of pictures. So unless you want this to get even more public than it already is, I suggest you take your things and find somewhere else to stay. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, Sadie. Maybe David's place? Oh, wait. His wife probably changed those locks, too. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out if there was an angle she hadn't considered, some way to turn this situation to her advantage. But there wasn't. For the first time in our marriage, I held all the cards. This isn't over, she said finally. Yes, it is. You'll be served with divorce papers tomorrow morning. Rita Gonzalez is my attorney. Have your lawyer call her. I closed the door and listened to her load her belongings into her car. It took 3 trips, 15 years of marriage, 3 trips to haul away the evidence. My phone rang as soon as her car pulled out of the driveway. Pete. Tommy? What the hell is going on? Linda Kennedy just called me. She said you caught Sadie cheating? Word travels fast. Jesus Christ, Tommy, are you okay? I'm better than I've been in months, actually. It's amazing how good it feels to finally know the truth. Where's Sadie now? Gone. I changed the locks and put her stuff on the porch. She's probably at a hotel or maybe trying to figure out if David's couch is available. Pete was quiet for a moment. You need me to come over? No, I'm good. Actually, I'm better than good. I'm free. And I was. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like myself again. Not the patient, understanding husband who accepted excuses and explanations, not the guy who pretended not to notice when his wife came home smelling like another man's cologne. Just Tom Langley, 42 years old, recently divorced, with a clear conscience and a plan. The next morning, Rita filed the divorce papers at 8 a.m. sharp. By 9, Sadie had been served at her temporary hotel. By 10, both she and David had been called into HR meetings at their respective offices. By noon, they were both unemployed. I spent the day at work, fielding calls from mutual friends who'd heard various versions of the story. Some were sympathetic, others seemed to think I'd overreacted. Julie Martinez, Sadie's best friend, called me around 3 p.m. "Tom, I think you're being incredibly cruel," she said without preamble. "Hello to you too, Julie. Sadie made a mistake. A big one, yes, but people make mistakes. Did you have to destroy her entire life over it?" "I didn't destroy anything, Julie. I documented what I saw and made some phone calls. Sadie destroyed her own life when she decided to have an affair." "You got her fired." "No, her company's ethics policy got her fired. I just provided the evidence. If she didn't want to face the consequences of sleeping with a subordinate, she shouldn't have slept with a subordinate. You're being vindictive. I'm being thorough, there's a difference." Julie hung up on me, but not before I heard her mutter something about men and their egos. I deleted her number from my phone. If Sadie wanted to keep her friends, she should have thought about that before she decided to redecorate David's lap with her ass. By the end of the week, the story had spread through our entire social circle. Sadie's version painted her as a woman who'd made a mistake and was being punished by a vindictive ex-husband. My version was simpler. I'd caught my wife cheating and responded accordingly. Some people believed her, some people believed me. Most people just enjoyed the drama, but I was just getting started. Sadie's first mistake was thinking she could control the narrative. Her second mistake was underestimating how much I'd learned about social media from managing IT projects for companies that lived and died by their online reputation. It started small. A post on our neighborhood's Facebook group, written with just the right tone of hurt bewilderment. "Hi everyone. Some of you may have heard that Sadie and I are getting divorced. I wanted to address the rumors and set the record straight. Last Thursday, I discovered my wife of 15 years having an affair with her co-worker. I have photographic evidence, which I've shared with their employers and the relevant family members. I'm not looking for sympathy or taking sides, just wanted everyone to know the truth. Thanks for your support during this difficult time. Tom." Within an hour, the post had 37 comments and 62 likes. By the end of the day, it had been shared to 3 other local Facebook groups and had generated its own comment thread on Nextdoor. Sadie called me, furious. "You posted about our private business on Facebook? What is wrong with you?" "Nothing's wrong with me, Sadie. I'm just being transparent. Isn't that what you always said you wanted in our marriage? More communication?" "That's not communication, that's public humiliation." Funny, that's exactly how I felt sitting in that cafe watching my wife play house with another man. The difference is, I was humiliated privately. You're being humiliated publicly. Seems fair to me. She hung up, but the damage was done. Our neighbors, the people we'd barbecued with and exchanged Christmas cards with for over a decade, now knew exactly what had happened, and they were taking sides. The Hendersons from next door brought me a casserole and told me they'd always thought Sadie was a little too friendly with the men at neighborhood parties. The Johnsons from across the street invited me to their weekly poker game. Even Mrs. Chen, the elderly widow who rarely spoke to anyone, stopped me while I was getting my mail to say she was proud of me for standing up for myself. But the real masterstroke came when Julie Martinez made the mistake of trying to defend Sadie in the comments section of my Facebook post. "There are 2 sides to every story," she wrote. "Maybe if Tom had been a better husband, Sadie wouldn't have looked elsewhere for companionship." I screenshotted her comment and sent it to her husband, Mike, along with a simple message. "Thought you should know your wife thinks cheating is justified if the husband isn't good enough. Might want to keep an eye on her girls' nights out. Mike called me 20 minutes later. Tom, what the hell is this about? Your wife thinks I deserve to be cheated on because I wasn't a good enough husband. I figured you'd want to know her philosophy on marital fidelity. Jesus, I had no idea she felt that way. Might want to ask her about those girls' nights she's been going on with Sadie. According to Sadie, they were work meetings. According to work, Sadie was having an affair. Makes you wonder what else they've been lying about. I wasn't trying to break up Mike and Julie's marriage. I was just planting seeds of doubt, the same way Pete had planted them in my mind. If Julie wanted to defend adultery, she could deal with the consequences of that position in her own relationship. The next day, Julie deleted her comment and blocked me on Facebook.
You cheated on me. You betrayed me. You destroyed our family.
Yes, I cheated. And you're the one to blame. You were never there for me. We're divorcing.
You get nothing. The house is mine. The money is mine. You'll live on the street. What?
Want to know who I cheated with? Your boss! He's a real man!
You're finished! I'll make sure you get nothing! You hear me? Nothing!
I don't need your money. I'm leaving you for him. He's twice the man you are. And you know what else?
But Mike didn't call me back to yell, which told me everything I needed to know about how that conversation had gone at the Martinez household. Meanwhile, David Kennedy was dealing with his own problems. Linda had not only filed for divorce, but had also posted a scathing review of him on every platform she could find. His LinkedIn profile was flooded with comments about his unprofessional conduct. His Instagram was full of people asking about his extracurricular activities. Someone had even created a fake dating profile for him with the tagline, "Married but available for lap dances at local cafes." I wasn't behind all of it. Linda was handling most of David's public humiliation herself, and she was doing a thorough job. But I may have helped by providing her with a few additional details about Sadie and David's relationship that I'd pieced together from old text messages and credit card statements. For instance, the work conference Sadie had attended in Milwaukee 2 months ago. David had been there too, and they'd stayed at the same hotel. The girls' night dinners that had become so frequent lately. Several of them had been charged to David's credit card. The new lingerie I'd found in Sadie's drawer, purchased the day before one of those overtime sessions. Linda was a forensic accountant by training, and she approached David's infidelity like an audit. By the time she was done, she had a timeline that went back 6 months and included receipts, hotel records, and phone logs. She shared all of it with her divorce attorney, and some of it found its way to me. "Your wife's been planning this for a long time," Linda told me when she called to compare notes. "This wasn't some spontaneous affair. They've been meeting regularly, spending money, making plans. David even looked at apartments for them to move in together." Apartments? A 2-bedroom place downtown. He put down a deposit 3 weeks ago. Apparently they were planning to leave their spouses and start fresh. That was news to me. Sadie had never mentioned wanting to move, let alone planning to leave me for David. But it explained a lot. The distance, the secrecy, the way she'd been treating our marriage like a temporary inconvenience. "Do you have documentation of the apartment?" I asked. "Lease agreement, deposit receipt, email correspondence with the landlord. David's not very good at covering his tracks." "Can you send me copies?" "Already on their way." I forwarded everything to Rita, who added it to our growing file of evidence. Between the cafe photos, the workplace affair, and now proof of premeditation, Sadie's position in the divorce proceedings was getting worse by the day. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The next phase of my campaign targeted their professional reputations. Both Sadie and David worked in HR, a field where trust and ethical conduct were supposedly paramount. I spent a weekend researching their industry connections, professional organizations, and former colleagues. Then I started making phone calls. Hi, this is Tom Langley. I'm calling about a reference check for Sadie Langley. She's applying for a position with your company, and I wanted to provide some context about her recent employment termination. Most HR departments wouldn't take unsolicited calls about potential employees, but a few were willing to listen, especially when I mentioned that I had documentation of ethical violations and could provide evidence if needed. I did the same thing with David, reaching out to companies where he'd applied and professional contacts he'd listed on his LinkedIn profile. I wasn't lying or making false accusations. I was simply providing factual information about their recent terminations and the reasons behind them. Within 2 weeks, both Sadie and David were finding it nearly impossible to get interviews, let alone job offers. Word had spread through the local HR community that they were damaged goods, professionals who'd violated the basic ethical standards of their own field. Sadie called me again, this time sobbing. "Tom, you have to stop this. I can't get hired anywhere. People are talking about me, saying I'm unethical, unprofessional. You're destroying my career." "I'm not destroying anything, Sadie. I'm just making sure people have all the facts when they consider hiring you. If you don't like the facts, you shouldn't have created them." "This is cruel. This is beyond anything I did to you." "Is it? Because what you did to me was plan to leave our marriage for 6 months while pretending everything was fine. You were going to move in with David and probably would have served me with divorce papers once you were settled in your new apartment. The only difference is I found out first." She was quiet for a long moment. "How did you know about the apartment?" "Linda's very thorough. Forensic accountant, remember? She found your love nest and all the documentation that went with it." "Tom, please. I'm sorry. I know I hurt you, but this has gone too far. Can't we handle this quietly? Like adults? We could have handled it quietly if you'd been honest with me 6 months ago. But you chose deception instead. Now you get to live with the consequences. What do you want from me?" "Nothing, Sadie. I don't want anything from you anymore. That's the point." She hung up, and I went back to my computer to check on the latest developments in what Pete had started calling Operation Scorched Earth. The nickname was apt. By the end of the month, Sadie and David's affair had cost them their jobs, their marriages, their social circle, and their professional reputations. They were both living in cheap apartments, struggling to find work, and dealing with divorce proceedings that were going very badly for them. But I still wasn't satisfied, because I'd learned something about revenge that I hadn't expected. It was addictive. Every small victory, every consequence they faced, every moment of their discomfort made me feel a little better about the months of lies and humiliation I'd endured. And I was just getting started with the main event. 3 weeks after the Café incident, I got the call I'd been expecting. Sadie's lawyer, a nervous-sounding man named Bradley Walsh, wanted to arrange a meeting to discuss settlement terms and avoid further public embarrassment. I agreed to meet at a neutral location, Millfield Park, the same place where Sadie and I had gotten engaged 12 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me, and I suspected it wouldn't be lost on Sadie either. Rita advised against meeting without her present, but I wanted to handle this face-to-face. Some conversations required looking your opponent in the eye. They were already there when I arrived, Sadie, David, and both their lawyers, sitting at a picnic table near the pond like some kind of bizarre double date. Sadie looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, hair that hadn't seen a professional stylist in weeks, clothes that looked like they'd come from a discount store. David looked worse. He'd lost weight, and not in a healthy way. His usually perfect hair was unkempt, and he kept glancing around nervously like he expected someone to jump out of the bushes. "Tom," Sadie's lawyer stood up as I approached. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Bradley, right? We spoke on the phone." "Yes, and this is David's attorney, Patricia Vance." I nodded to both lawyers, then looked at Sadie and David. "You two look like hell." "Thanks," Sadie said bitterly. "That's what happens when your ex-husband destroys your entire life." "I didn't destroy anything, Sadie. I just documented what you'd already destroyed and made sure the right people knew about it. David finally spoke up. Look, Tom, we know you're angry. Angry? I interrupted. I'm not angry anymore, David. Angry was what I felt in the cafe. This is something else entirely. What do you want? Sadie asked. Money? The house? Just tell us what it'll take to make this stop. I sat down across from them, taking my time to get comfortable. You know what's funny? 6 months ago, if you'd just been honest with me, we could have had a civilized divorce. You could have moved in with David, I could have moved on with my life, and everyone would have been fine. But you chose to lie instead. People make mistakes, David started. Stop calling it a mistake. I slammed my hand on the table, making everyone jump. Mistakes are accidental. You two planned this for months. You got an apartment together. You were going to leave your spouses and start fresh, and you were going to do it after months of lying and cheating and making us feel crazy for noticing something was wrong. Sadie was crying now. Tom, please. We're sorry. We're both sorry. What more do you want? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to know what it feels like to have your life turned upside down by someone else's choices. I want you to experience a fraction of the humiliation and betrayal that you put me through. You've done that, Patricia Vance said. My client has lost his job, his marriage, his professional reputation. Surely that's enough. Is it? Let me ask you something, Patricia. If your husband was planning to leave you for his secretary, and he spent 6 months lying to your face while he set up a new life with her, how much revenge would be enough? She didn't answer. Bradley cleared his throat. What are your settlement demands, Tom? I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Rita drew up the terms. I get the house, the cars, the retirement accounts, and the investments. Sadie gets her personal belongings and whatever's left in her checking account. Sadie's face went white. That's everything. You're leaving me with nothing. That's what you were planning to leave me with when you moved in with David. The only difference is, I found out first. This is vindictive and excessive, Bradley said, scanning the documents. This is legal and justified. Your client committed adultery, violated her professional ethics, and was planning to abandon her marriage for a premeditated affair. In Illinois, adultery is grounds for an at-fault divorce, which means she's not entitled to an equal split of marital assets. David leaned forward. What about me? I've lost everything too. My wife, my job, my kids barely speak to me. Haven't I been punished enough? I looked at him for a long moment. David, you're 39 years old. You threw away your marriage and your career to sit in dark corners of cafes with another man's wife. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them. You're destroying innocent people, Sadie said. Our friends, our families, people who had nothing to do with this. Really? Because last I checked, Julie Martinez was having some interesting conversations with her husband about her views on marital fidelity. And your sister called me yesterday to apologize for not seeing what kind of person you'd become. Seems like people are just learning who you really are. The lawyers exchanged glances. This wasn't going the way they'd hoped. Tom, Bradley tried again. What would it take for you to agree to a more equitable settlement? Nothing. This isn't a negotiation. These are my terms. Sadie can sign the papers and walk away with her dignity intact, or she can fight it, and I'll make sure every detail of her affair becomes public record in the court proceedings. You can't do that, Patricia said. Divorce proceedings are confidential. The proceedings are confidential. The evidence isn't. I have photos, receipts, hotel records, text messages, and witness statements. If this goes to trial, all of that becomes part of the public record. Plus, I'll have to testify about what I saw, and I have a very good memory for details. Sadie was sobbing now. You used to love me. How can you be so cruel? I did love you. For 15 years, I loved you more than anything in the world. I would have done anything for you, forgiven you almost anything, supported you through any crisis. but you threw that away for a few months of sneaking around with your coworker. You chose this, Sadie. All of it. I stood up and looked down at both of them. You have 48 hours to decide. Sign the settlement agreement, or we go to trial, and I make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of people you are. As I walked back to my car, I could hear Sadie crying and the lawyers trying to calm their clients down. I felt a moment of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. They'd made their choices. Now they got to live with the consequences. But as I drove home, I realized that confronting them face to face hadn't given me the satisfaction I'd expected. If anything, seeing them broken and desperate had left me feeling empty. The revenge that had seemed so important, so justified, was starting to feel hollow. Maybe it was time to end this and move on with my life. Or maybe it was time for one final, decisive blow that would close this chapter forever. I was about to find out which. The decision came to me on a Friday evening, exactly 1 month after the Café incident. I was sitting in my empty house drinking a beer and scrolling through Facebook when I saw Sadie's post, "Going through a difficult time right now. Some of you may have heard rumors about my personal life. All I can say is that people change, relationships end, and sometimes good people make bad choices. I'm working to rebuild my life and would appreciate privacy during this challenging period. Thank you to those who have reached out with support." 37 likes and dozens of sympathetic comments. Stay strong, Sadie. You deserve better. Some people just can't forgive and move on. She was still trying to control the narrative, still playing the victim, still acting like our marriage had just ended naturally instead of being destroyed by her deliberate choices. That's when I decided it was time for the grand finale. I'd been saving one piece of evidence, the security footage from the apartment building where Sadie and David had rented their love nest. Linda had obtained it through her divorce proceedings, and she'd shared it with me as a professional courtesy. The footage showed Sadie and David entering the building together multiple times over the past 3 months, sometimes in the middle of the day when they were supposed to be at work. I'd been holding on to it, waiting for the right moment. Sadie's pity-seeking Facebook post told me that moment had arrived, but I didn't want to just post the video online. That would be too simple, too easy to dismiss or ignore. I wanted something bigger, something that would reach everyone in our social circle simultaneously and leave no room for doubt or alternative explanations. That's when I remembered the Hendersons' annual block party. Every year, Jim and Margaret Henderson threw a massive neighborhood gathering in Millfield Park. Everyone came, all the neighbors, their extended families, friends from work, local business owners. It was the social event of the year for our little corner of suburban Chicago. This year's party was scheduled for the following Saturday. Perfect timing. I called Jim Henderson on Saturday morning. "Jim, it's Tom Langley. I wanted to thank you for all the support you and Margaret have shown me during the divorce." "Of course, Tom. You're a good man, and what Sadie did to you was inexcusable." "I appreciate that. Listen, I have a favor to ask. You know how you always set up that big screen TV at the block party for the kids' movies?" "Sure, every year. Why?" "I'd like to use it for a few minutes tonight, if that's okay. I want to address some rumors that have been going around about the divorce. Set the record straight once and for all." Jim was quiet for a moment. "Tom, you're not planning anything inappropriate, are you?" "Nothing inappropriate. Just the truth. I have some evidence I'd like to share, help people understand what really happened." "Well, I suppose that's fair. You've been taking a lot of heat from Sadie's supporters. Maybe it's time people heard your side." "Exactly. Just 5 minutes, Jim. That's all I need." The block party started at 6 p.m. I arrived at 7 when the crowd was at its peak. Nearly 100 people were scattered around the park, neighbors, friends, families with kids running around the playground. Sadie wasn't there, but several of her supporters were, including Julie Martinez and a few other women who'd been spreading the "Tom is vindictive" narrative. I'd prepared a presentation on my laptop, Photos from the cafe, documentation of the apartment lease, receipts from their secret dates, and the security footage Linda had provided. Everything was organized chronologically, telling the complete story of Sadie and David's affair from beginning to end. At 7:30, during a lull in the evening's activities, I approached Jim Henderson. "Mind if I borrow the screen now?" "Sure, Tom. Everyone, can I have your attention? Tom Langley would like to say a few words." The crowd gathered around the big screen TV that Jim had set up near the pavilion. I connected my laptop and looked out at the sea of faces. Neighbors I'd known for years, people who'd attended barbecues at my house, friends who'd taken sides in the divorce drama. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began. "As most of you know, Sadie and I are getting divorced. There have been a lot of rumors and conflicting stories about what happened, and I wanted to set the record straight." I clicked to the first slide, the date and timestamp from the cafe photos. On Thursday, October 12th, at approximately 8:15 p.m., I discovered my wife having an affair. The photos appeared on the big screen in high definition. Sadie on David's lap, their intimate body language, the shock on their faces when they saw me. Several people in the crowd gasped. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, I continued, clicking to the next slide. This was a planned, ongoing affair that had been developing for months. I showed the apartment lease, the hotel receipts, the credit card statements. Each piece of evidence built on the last, creating an undeniable timeline of deception and betrayal. Sadie and David weren't just having an affair, I said, clicking to the security footage. They were planning to leave their spouses and start a new life together. This is footage from their apartment building, showing them entering together during work hours over the past 3 months. The video played on the big screen, showing Sadie and David entering the building hand in hand, sometimes carrying overnight bags, sometimes just disappearing inside for hours at a time. The crowd was completely silent now. Even the kids had stopped playing to watch the presentation. "I'm not sharing this to embarrass anyone," I said, though that was exactly what I was doing. "I'm sharing it because some people have suggested that I'm being vindictive, that I should just forgive and move on. I want everyone to understand what forgiveness would have meant in this case." I clicked to the final slide, a timeline showing how Sadie and David had planned to reveal their affair after moving in together, leaving their spouses to deal with the aftermath. They weren't going to confess. They weren't going to ask for forgiveness. They were going to abandon their marriages and let us figure out what had happened. The only reason any of this came to light is because I happened to stop at a cafe during a rainstorm. I disconnected my laptop and looked out at the crowd. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then someone started clapping. Slowly, others joined in, until most of the crowd was applauding. Not everyone. Julie Martinez and a few others looked horrified, but the majority of our neighbors were showing their support. Jim Henderson approached me as people began to disperse. "Tom, that was thorough." "I believe in being thorough. Sadie's not going to be able to show her face in this neighborhood again. That's her choice to make." As I packed up my laptop, several neighbors came over to shake my hand or pat me on the back. Mrs. Chen, the elderly widow, grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "You did the right thing," she said. "My husband cheated on me 40 years ago, and I forgave him. Biggest mistake of my life. Some people don't deserve forgiveness." I drove home feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The presentation had been seen by nearly everyone in our social circle. By tomorrow, the video would be shared throughout our extended network of friends and acquaintances. Sadie's attempt to paint herself as the victim of a vindictive ex-husband was officially over. But the real satisfaction came on Monday morning when I got a call from Bradley Walsh. "Tom, Sadie wants to sign the settlement agreement." "All of it? No modifications?" "All of it. She also wanted me to tell you that she's moving out of state, starting fresh somewhere else." "Good for her. She asked me to pass along a message. She said to tell you that you won. I thought about that for a moment. Tell her she's wrong. I didn't win anything. I just refused to lose quietly. After I hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the city where I'd spent my entire adult life. Sadie would be gone soon, probably taking David with her. Their affair had cost them everything: jobs, marriages, friends, reputation, financial security. They'd learned that actions have consequences, that betrayal comes with a price. But I'd learned something too. Revenge, no matter how justified, no matter how satisfying in the moment, doesn't actually heal anything. It doesn't bring back the trust that was broken or the love that was lost. It just ensures that everyone involved pays a price for the damage that was done. The rain had stopped weeks ago, but the storm was finally over. I had my life back. Now I had to figure out what to do with it. 2 days later, I came home to find an envelope on my doorstep. No return address, but I recognized Sadie's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Tom, I know you'll probably throw this away without reading it, but I had to try one more time to explain. You're right about everything. I planned the affair. I lied to you for months. I was going to leave you for David. I was selfish and cruel, and I destroyed the best thing in my life for something that wasn't worth having. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand what I lost. I hope someday you can find happiness with someone who deserves you. I'm sorry for everything. Sadie. I read it twice, then walked to my fireplace and burned it. Some apologies come too late to matter. But as I watched the paper turn to ash,